All right, here we go. So welcome back. This is day 2. This is Tuesday, June 8th, 2021. This is the virtual residency workshop at the introductory, intermediate, and advanced levels. And this morning, our early morning session is a panel on cyber infrastructure user support. And I'm going to turn the show over to the moderator, Mohammed Tanash. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see all those faces on the Zoom chat. And I'm glad to be a part of this great workshop with Henry and everyone over here. Today, our panel is going to be a panel session. And our panel will going to be like focused on the cyber infrastructure user support. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, here you go. Can you see my screen first?
Yes, we can. Looks great. Do one thing. Can you advance one slide just so we make sure we see the slides advancing?
Sure.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. So as I said, like our title for our panel is Cyber Infrastructure User Support. And my name is Mohammed. I am a software specialist working at University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And, you know, like my role here, like in the UNL institution is about like dealing with, you know, supporting users, which is one big main part of my job. And you know, also dealing with softwares, you know, installing softwares, dealing with helping researchers and users to achieve their goals. And as you know, like this is not an easy task because always, you know, dealing with users is totally different. Sometimes people, they said like, okay, dealing with, you know, when you are dealing with a machine, it's you know, something easier than dealing with users. So our focus, or our main focus on this panel is going to be like, we will discuss like a user support and difficulties, like challenges encounter this role, and you know, how to better support HPC users as well. And ways, you know, methods that's using, or that like many institutions used for these things, or like for supporting users, and many things. I don't want to take much time like in the introduction, so probably we'll go like directly to the panel. But before of that, we have lovely 6 panelists joining us this morning for this panel, and I'm gonna give them the chance to introduce themselves. First of all, like let's go by Hussein.
Hi everyone, this is Hussein Al-Azawi. I work at the University of New Mexico HPC Center, and I build systems, so I'm doing it backwards compared to Tanash. Like it depends on, you know, when you hear Henry say that everyone fell backwards into this field. So in my case, I started as a network engineer, started doing storage systems, and then I moved into like research facilitation, working with different research groups as they write their grants, helping them with their systems, understanding the needs, and then moving forward to execute once they get their funding. So that's part of what I do. Tanash, take it back.
Thank you, Hussein. Nice to have you over here. And Adam?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Adam Caprice. I work for the Holland Computing Center at the University of Nebraska. I'm the applications lead there, so I manage essentially the user-facing folks at HCC. So we do, you know, facilitation, software, debugging, workflow development, that sort of thing. Like most places, we're roughly split half between systems and user-facing folks. So I manage that team. Thanks, Mohammed.
Great, thank you, Adam. Shelley?
Hi, I'm Shelley Knuth. I'm the Director of Research Computing at the University of Colorado in Boulder. But up until about 5 months ago, I was the Director for User Support at CU Boulder. And so our group, we have about 1,300 active users. We're a team of approximately 4 or 5 people for the user support side. Our full team is around 15 or so. And, we help users with training and documentation and answering tickets, and we hold office hours and we do all kinds of things.
Great, thank you, Shelley. Natasha?
Hi, everyone. My name is Natasha Pavlovich, and I'm still a PhD student in computer science at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. For the past few years, I've been working as a graduate research assistant at the Holland Computing Center at University of Nebraska. And I've been helping with software applications and user support and various outreach activities in our center. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Natasha. Christina?
Hello, I'm Christina Roberts with the University of Missouri-Columbia. I got a degree in biology, then worked for Dr. Christine Elsick, who is also with MU, in a bioinformatics lab where I was introduced to HPC. I started working for Research Support Services in February 2020 and focus in helping users who do not come from a computer science or physics background learn how to utilize our resources in their research. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I'm Dave Turner. I work for Kansas State University. I'm a member of a group of 4 of us that manage our cluster there. And we have Dan Andreessen, who's our director, and then we have 2 sysadmins, and then my job is the application scientist. So my background, I have a PhD in physics, but I've really been doing computer science since I got my PhD, doing a lot of parallel computing, optimization, and then getting into benchmarking, performance analysis stuff, as well as user support. But K-State, again, I'm user support, but I also help with benchmarking the hardware and making sure that's running properly, things like that.
Great, thank you, Dave. So as you can see, guys, like we have a very nice collection of panelists that are participating from different institutions. So we will have like a great discussion and great feedback as well. So like, I'm gonna just like, explain the flows of the panels, how it's gonna go. So usually like, we have some questions, so we're gonna ask the panelists about those questions, and we will get their answers, feedback, and suggestions. On the other hand, like if you have any questions, please don't hesitate, to write your question in the chat box, so we will try to get as many as we can from your questions. So we will like leave the 15 minutes probably like at the end of this session to answer different questions from the audience. So when we are talking about user support, or like the role of cyber infrastructure in general, so as you know, like there is every job, every rule, they have a challenge that they face, to best give the service to the users. So regarding the cyber infrastructure, the first question is, what are the most common challenges to most institutions or HPC centers supporting HPC users? And how can we minimize the effect of it? We want to get like the feedback. So I'll start with probably like Adam. What do you think about this?
Thanks. So that's a pretty broad question. I think, in general, it probably boils down to most other things is funding. Funding is always a challenge in this area. But I'm going to focus sort of on the, on the support side. And in that case, I think probably the biggest challenge is justifying to your institution the need for user support personnel. It's a pretty straightforward argument, and it's an accepted argument that obviously you need sysadmins and folks like that to run the hardware. But I think at least in prior years, justifying why do you need facilitators and support personnel has been a challenge, although that's greatly improved, in the past 5 to 10 years. So let me maybe go over to Shelley and see from her perspective what she thinks.
Absolutely. Shelley, please.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. That was my top answer too, but I can add more. Staffing is exactly what you said. It's a hard sell to make because it's expensive, to bring on probably the proper number of staff we would need to really do an amazing job supporting users in the way that they deserve. It's a hard sell to make. But of course we all know it's necessary. I think that, some ways that we can approach this as a field or as a group or what have you is, showing, if we can show best effort at bringing in tools and resources that can minimize as much as we can how much of a touch point we need to make with the end users, that might help. If for no other reason, then we can point out, we have all of these tools here, but it turns out we still need some extra staff. I think that's a real important thing to do. And if I can, share something else that I see, to not, just piggyback off of what Adam said. I think another common challenge is just that the landscape of users is changing, and trying to reach all of the different disciplines and all the different skill levels is a welcome challenge, I think, for all of us, trying to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all kinds of researchers from different disciplines, and again, across the spectrum of skill level.
Yeah, I would just expand a little bit and say, I think, the situation is a lot better than it was, 5 or 10 years ago. So I think at this point, there's a critical mass of places that have these folks in place that I think, one effective way is to go to your administration and say, hey, look, all these other places have these folks, right? So now it's a question of, do we want to keep up with the Joneses and stay competitive? If we do, we need these folks.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I actually did that recently at our institution to kind of point to that, and I think it's helpful.
Sure. What about you, Dave? Like, how do you deal with those challenges
Right.
it?
So I'll speak more to the hardware side. I agree budgeting is clearly a huge issue. We've had very good luck using the condo model, where professors can buy in. They buy compute nodes with funding that they can write in hardware needs into their funding requests. And then they get their own compute nodes. We agree to manage them for free. And in return, when their people aren't using them, we get access for those other people in the university and beyond so that they can use them. And this gives us a really good balance between giving priority to the people that are funding the hardware and still leaving enough freedom so that people who don't have funding can have really significant access to the hardware resources. Our university has moved its entire budgeting philosophy over to cost recovery. So there's been big pressure for us to do the same. And I don't think that works as well with supercomputers, because it can then limit the science that would normally go on that isn't necessarily funded. And I think that's a bad thing. So we've done pretty good at staying away from a pure cost recovery basis. On the compute side, the compromise for us has been that we do cost recovery for storage, but we're pretty generous in that we provide up to 1 terabyte of free access for home directories to each user. But then we charge for bulk storage beyond that, and it's $45 per terabyte per year. So then we can at least go to the university and say, well, we are doing some cost recovery, but we don't have to, at least at this point, apply that to the computational side. And that's been kind of our ongoing fight with the university. And I think so far we've been able to get a good compromise with them.
So Dave, I would come and buy some storage from
Yep.
you at that price.
We'll sell it to you. We got extra.
So Hussein, what do you think about this?
So I will follow up on what Dave said and then Shelly and Adam. So because I do both sides, and on the system side, like it's a big communication deal with the researchers to get them to understand what do we really offer for free and what we have to charge for, and what is our limitation also. So communication plays a big role here. And it goes to funding and all of these things. So now, after all of these years, we have ready documentation that we can share with our researchers, as if somebody is going after a grant or something like that, that they can start with this document and build on it as what they can, what resources do we have, what can they do, what premium services we offer. And then we started, because of the funding issues, we started kind of like an internal campus champions deal for graduate or undergraduate students. So what we go and do is we recruit some of the best. We have great students. You'll be surprised how many students are using already the HPC systems or used it in other places and they came to the school. So we would recruit maybe 3 or 4 graduate students every semester, train them how to use the HPC systems. And, you know, it's surprising. Within a week or two, they'll be already responding to help tickets. And then if they want to stay with us, we keep them. Or if they want to go back to their department, we would work with the department to use them as ambassadors to train other students in their research groups. And like if it's, so that makes it easier. Like, sometimes you would get help externally from other people just because you trained them before. That helps.
That's great. Then, like, so as I can conclude, probably like the most challenges is going to be like the staff side or the number of the staffs and the funding side as well. And both of them, like, it's not easy because they are related to each other. Like if I have more funds, that means like I have more staff probably. And always money is a problem. Yeah, for that. So we'll go like usually, like, you know, and you know, as a cyber infrastructure, you know, user like support employee or staff, sometimes like there's some users, they will tell you, oh, okay, you know, I need to parallelize my code. Can you help me with this? Or sometimes, you know, I have this huge data and I need to manipulate this, like, or this data that I have to make it fit in my research. And, you know, some other stuff, sometimes like it's time consuming. Maybe it's challenge for the staff or the CI, like user support employee. And like, I want to know like how to differentiate between like helping users versus doing their jobs. And how often do you encounter it in your role at your institution? And how do you handle it? So I don't know, like Christina, do you like have any like, you know, suggestions or like, have you ever had this, like faced this problem before?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think it first starts with understanding what our specific roles are and what our jobs entail. We are there to help users get onto the cluster, maybe get software under the cluster, and help them run that software as efficiently as possible with the resources available. We do offer basic trainings and help sessions where we go over cluster specific issues any user may be having, but we tend to draw the line when it comes to how a specific software, how to use a specific software. There are really too many softwares on our clusters to for 4 CIEs to be expected to know how to use. And so instead we help users help themselves by directing them as to where they can get the software information from and how to test it if it does run, for example, like better in parallel or with more CPUs allocated. And so that's really where we tend to draw the line, is using that software specifically, instead of helping users get that software to in their programs to an efficient usage on the clusters.
Nice. And what about you, like Natasha, I think you face this problem a lot since you are dealing with users. And as well as like you can maybe probably like very good at differentiate between those, since you are like a PhD students and as an employee as well. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, since like I'm in this in-between situation, I do understand the users and how important like having their analysis promptly is, but I also like see perspective from staff aspect and how valuable time is and how many other things like we need to focus on. I definitely second like Christina's answer, and that's how I think our system's rule is that as long as the issue is related to the platform or the software or the resources we support, we provide full assistance. If the researcher needs more like a personal or one-on-one assistance in running and analyzing jobs, then we suggest them to pay for some dedicated staff time so we can like better help them. But this is a very gray area, so it's really hard to put the line. And what I've seen in my experience is that if someone from our staff is familiar with a particular question, and even though it's not HPC specific question, we do usually give the researcher some guidance by like from our experience or guiding them to the documentation of the tool. And as Christina said, we also like provide workshops and trainings, and we offer them as a way to start learning about our systems. My personal rule is that if it takes me 5 to 10 minutes to think about and answer a ticket, I do it regardless of the question. This way, it's not taking much of my time, and I'm still providing some assistance to the users of our clusters. But this is a personal decision. I do work in the field of bioinformatics, and I mostly help users that have bioinformatics questions, and we have a very wide range of bioinformatics users in our center. So I do encounter this question a lot. Maybe like a half of the tickets I answer are, how do I run this? I want to iterate through my FASTA files. How do I do that? Or my blast job is running too slow. What do I do? And with the experience, I can categorize these questions. So it's like I can spend 5 minutes and answer and help the users.
Absolutely. So the thing is, sometimes like, from an employee perspective is different than from like probably HPC director, and or like the director expectations from their employees. So what do you think, Shelley, about this?
Well, we've run into this problem a lot, and it's actually a good problem to have, I think, because what it tells me is that our support staff are really amazing, and that the users see that, and so they're looking for that help. And I think on the flip side of that too, because our staff is so great, sometimes they have a hard time, not diving in and helping. Our team probably does more software installs than we probably should, given the size of our user base. But it's something that we do to help out. And from your question, from the director perspective, I would love to see us sort of pull back on that, but it's hard to do it because our users will sort of start spinning their wheels a bit. One thing that we have come across, not just with software, but just in general with supporting our users, is sort of this, I don't know if miscommunication is the right word, but there's a misunderstanding about sort of what we can provide for free and what we would require some level of extra effort to do. And so in the past year, we came up with really clear tiered structure about what that would mean. You know, if we meet with you in our office hours, for example, you know, and it's a one-off question, or maybe a couple of, you know, times that we have to do a touch point, you know, we don't really think about it, but there's certain other tiered levels where we'll say, you know, we expect to be included in any publications you have, or, you know, here's an hourly rate that we could charge that, or sorry, not so much an hourly rate, but here's how we could be in your grant or something like that. So, you know, it's a balancing act that we deal with, but I view it again as a good problem to have. It means that you're needed, and it means that people value what you provide.
And that's interesting, Shelley. You've come up with the whole structure. We sort of do the same thing, but informally. So, you know, we have fuzzy limits about how much time we'll spend before we require dedicated effort and things like that. So it's interesting to me that you guys have actually sat down and worked it all out essentially. But I would, yeah. So I guess my general rule is if the question they're asking requires, you know, domain specific knowledge, then that's kind of an area where, you know, that's kind of the line where we have to draw a line. It's you know, we can help you get your blast job running, but if you start asking about, you know, what e-value do I need for this data set and things like that, that's really sort of beyond the scope of what we can provide as a sort of a general help apparatus.
That sounds like a good way of drawing that line.
And it's by no means a bright line, right? It gets fuzzy
Right.
all the time.
My problem is I'm on the other side of the line when it comes to parallel computing, because that's my background. I love doing it. I don't get to do it enough. So if someone comes to me and says their job is running too slowly, I say, well, send me your job, send me your code, let me look at it. Let's see if we can parallelize it, because I want to do that. I hope to get them involved in the process and educate them along the way, but that's beyond what we're kind of required to do. It's kind of what I want to do. It also works out well for us because it's talking points for Dan. When he goes out to try to get funding, he can say, well, we took this code and made it run 50 times faster. And it's a real easy bragging point then.
Yeah, and we will do the same thing occasionally, but at that level of involvement, that's where we require some personnel funding time to be able to make that commitment, right?
And we don't always require that.
Right.
So I have enough freedom of my time that I can put towards stuff like that. So
well, that's great. That's a good situation to be in, then I would say.
Well, sometimes the problem is like, you know, it's like, okay, like if a user asks a question related to their research or not, like the, you know, user support level job, sometimes it's, you know, it's going to be like hard because like the question will be followed by like for like many questions as well. Like, oh, I have this question. If you help them with this question or this area, they will come again and again and try, you know, to ask, because like, you know, they see it, it's like easy and it's the easiest way to have someone to help me with this. And instead of spending much time as, you know, as HPC user, or like have a, you know, just like a, let's say like small background or not that big background about like high performance computing and parallelizing things. And this is where I see the problem is. Sometimes like I need to help users, but sometimes, you know, this user will come, ask a question, I'll help them. Then after that, oh, okay, I have this another problem, then this another problem. And that's like actually is gonna take, it's, so you are in the border that you can't leave the user because you already started with him or her, and then like it's really hard to continue as well because it's a very time consuming and takes your time, and you want to make your you know, like the director or like your boss happy about what you are doing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, grad students will always take the path of least resistance, right? So if they can if they can keep asking someone questions and get answers, and again, you know, it goes back to Shelley's point where you're almost you're doomed by your own success, right? you're good, you have such a good support to help them, and then they just keep asking you questions, and before you know it, you're reading a paper on blast e-values to try and answer their question or something.
I love your analogy, Adam. And as a former grad student, yeah, like we tend to be abusive. Like you would take any chance that can make.
Oh yeah,
life
I was,
easier.
I was a PhD grad student too, right? And I did the same
Right?
thing. So
what we do is at our center is we figured out you kind of after some time you start knowing your users and knowing how to deal with them. And it's kind of like they end up in a few groups where like these elite users, they're so good, they are on their own. They come to you when they really need help. And then other users who are just like new, trying to find their way. And you have users who just like what Tanash described. It's like they would come to you with a little problem that initiate something. And then like they would throw a little and more until you end up doing their own work. What we do, we discuss such help tickets at the help ticket meeting. And then sometimes we decide to CC the PI because it's mostly, like the active users, most of them are grad students or maybe undergrads. So once you start CCing the PI and you request the justification for why do you need this? Like sometimes we had once a help ticket with a student who was asking for installing like 17 different softwares. And we were like, are you sure you're going to use all of these 17? Do you really need them? Can you tell us why? It's just like, hey, can you install this and go? We were fooled by such tickets before and we would go and install, but then we would check and never been used. So we learned like sometimes, okay, CC the PI and see where it goes.
Yeah, what I'm reading right now from the comments, there's like a comment sometimes like Vinod said like users sometimes they want you to fix a very easy stuff that like they want it like in very very fast, or like sometimes you don't have time and you want to spend that time for them for just a very small stuff. They can sometimes Google it, right? So if they just Google sometimes the problem, they will see the solution in the first link probably. But yeah, never mind. So we'll go again for the question 3. And when we are talking about users, solving their problems, helping them, after that, we are like the best way probably like maybe using, some training and, provide some workshops and probably guide them to how to use the resources, which is probably maybe a better idea than, like trying to help all users for every problem. Teaching them is better than, sometimes helping them. Not all of the cases, but yeah, sometimes it works. So how do we reach the best result for cyber infrastructure outreach, education and training? And how do you guide users to use HPC resources? Do you develop training materials for novice, intermediate, advanced users? And what do you think, Dave?
So we do kind of the typical thing. We hold workshops about twice a year, and they're usually 4 hours total, spread over 2 days. And we start with the very basic, this is what Linux is, because you absolutely have to do that. And we try to fit as much as we can in 1 hour. And that's not enough time, but it's a start. Then we can point users towards this typical stuff that's available on the internet. But then we try to kind of rotate through different sets of material each workshop so that we're not covering the same thing each time. So we may have an hour on how to use Git, for example, or I'll do an hour-long talk on this is kind of what parallel computing is conceptually, to give people a background, not going into this is how you parallelize something in this code or this language, but just kind of a conceptual background and things like that. One of the things that we've done more recently is we've started remote hosting the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center Big Data Workshop. And that's been very popular on campus because everyone wants to do machine learning type stuff. And the Pittsburgh group really does a very good job. They've been doing it for a number of years. And so all we have to do is find a room where we can put 50 or 60 people in that has the video hookup. And then we sit there with them and we help answer the questions. Is all we have to do. It's actually Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center people that are teaching it. And we've gone a step further than that in that we've taken the videos from that workshop and made an online resource where students or faculty can go through at their own pace through the videos. And we've got some exercises they can do and get automatically graded. So they can get automatic feedback. So that is one more advanced thing that we've pursued.
Sure. What about, like, I'm wondering about the University of Missouri, Christina.
Yes, very similar to what Dave said. We have novice Linux training that lasts about an hour. But we actually offer our introduction trainings 2 times every semester. So like in the end of August or September and October, and then at the end of January and February, and then again twice over the summer, because we're really trying to hit those big onboarding new grad student times. And I think so that we're not getting a bunch of the same questions in our help sessions. We see that there's often quite a few new users during those times where we get more grad students in. Grad students are getting out of undergraduate school and coming in the summer, or they're starting in the fall or the winter. So we find that really helpful to have it offered more than twice a year. And we also have extensive documentation available that answers a lot of questions, but there is a little bit of getting the users to actually read the documentation. So we find that sometimes it's a little bit more helpful to have the trainings where they have they're sitting in a class, but something that they're used to, sitting in a class, being told how to do the things, what to do, and then being able to ask questions while they're working alongside. And we actually host all of our trainings via Zoom right now since the pandemic started.
I think that's a great idea. Even like I didn't think about even like having classes. Probably that's going to be like a great idea offered from like probably computer science department or computer engineering departments, or bioinformatics, etc. So what do you think, Shilly, about this?
Yeah, so I've been writing a lot of things down that you guys are talking about. I mean, this is pretty interesting. I think, in terms of, I think the best results, if we had unlimited money and time and whatever, is to have, these one-on-one sit-down meetings where we dive in and help people, but that's not scalable, of course. So what we try to do at our institution is we provide trainings, as somebody mentioned, about intro to Linux, and we have a session on we call it supercomputing spin up. So it's Linux, but it's also, we use Slurm, so how to run with Slurm. We have a new user seminar. We have all kinds of trainings on containers and whatnot. In more recent years, we've tended to skew more towards supporting trainings for introductory users. And the reason for that is because we did some analysis that showed that something like 90% of the tickets we were getting in were on a lot of these concepts. But we try not to sort of abandon our intermediate and advanced users, and we'll offer some parallel computing, OpenMPI, all kinds of things. We also do a Python series, an 8-week Python series that really has very little to do with HPC, but it's a really interesting way to bring people into research computing. I think we all know that one of the problems that we have on a campus is just making people aware that we exist. And by doing that, people, they see that we're offering this class on Python, and then they're like, oh, it's research computing, and they'll come there. We also have a really strong partnership with the libraries on campus, and that has really expanded our teaching portfolio so that we can offer so many things, and it's expanded the kinds of questions we can ask as well. CU Boulder is also part of the Rocky Mountain Advanced Computing Consortium, and one of the ideas that I want to have is so we have a bunch of institutions in the Rocky Mountain West that have an interest in large scale computing, and we're all doing, not all of us, but a lot of us are doing trainings at our local institutions. So how can we crowdsource them and make them available across the consortium? We also have used the Exceed workshops. I love them. The Exceed workshops are great. The only problem I have is I can't find a room on campus that can support, there's some technological things that they require. And I finally secured a room, and it was, I hoarded it for a while, and then other people found out about it. And now, it's really hard to have that room for a whole day. So, but during the pandemic, they've been allowing people to not necessarily, to not be on site, and that we've been able to advertise again for that. And we have a list of trainings on our website that we can provide, and we can do snippets of those that we will teach for a class to help out our instructors. So these are the kinds of things that we're doing to try and help.
I love it actually, what you're doing at University of Boulder. It's kind of something special, and and I think like you guys at University of Colorado Boulder, you even care about advanced users, since also like you have the RMAC symposium like happening like every year. So I've attended that, and it was like great. So we have lots of questions, and I'll try, to go through all of them. But like probably the time limit is something we need to care about as well. So when we are talking about users using HPC, then that means softwares, which is the most frequent things that user used or HPC for. So the thing is, there is a problem sometimes, or I don't know if it's a problem or like something we need, like HPC employees in general or centers, they need to deal with. How do you approach the use of user software and the free versus licensed software? And this is, I think it's a big challenge sometimes. What do you think, Adam? Since
Yes.
you're like HPC software lead, so I'll
Well,
start.
yeah. So, as Shelley mentioned, software installs can quickly become a black hole of time, of staff time. So we try to lean heavily on things that are, so we don't try to build everything ourselves at this point. It's just not feasible. So we lean on package managers such as Conda and SPAC and some other things to try and automate that stuff into some degree and to have it be repeatable, which is another big thing. We also try to do a CI-based workflow, not a continuous integration-based workflow for our installs and such. So we have things in Git repos, and we can add software just by pushing stuff to a Git repo essentially. So that's helped take a lot of the drudgery out of it, because the computer can do things in the background while you do other things, right? Oh, sorry, Alexa's yelling at me. But again, the trick is to, as Hussein mentioned, sometimes you'll have folks that come along that just submit one and submit another and submit another and submit another, right? And so you have to be able to discern when that's happening and try to take some sort of steps to make sure that, yeah, you really need that. In terms of installing, so anything that's free / open source, we can basically install. Licensed stuff gets a little trickier, obviously. So we will make available anything that our institution has a site license for. We make those available on the clusters. Past that, it becomes essentially a particular research group's responsibility to get a license and to have a license server. And then at that point, we will we will install the licensed software just for their group on the machines, basically.
Great.
Yep. Thanks.
What do you think? What do you think, Dave? Like,
Oh,
how
Yeah,
do you deal with this, like in K-State?
I'll talk more about the licensed software. I'll reiterate on what Adam said, that if an individual user or group has licensed software, that we will install the software. They have to maintain the licensed server. And that works out very well that way, because they usually have the licensed server set up for their own desktop machine already, or their departmental server. So it's usually not a big deal to handle a lot of the licensed software. I will point out one in particular that we've dealt with is, of course, MATLAB. We do not have a site license for MATLAB on our campus because of the cost. There are certainly lots of licenses floating around campus. What we've settled on for our cluster is that we have a single MATLAB compiler license and a lot of the toolkits. So the approach we take is that people should develop their MATLAB software on their own machines. And then once they get to a point where they want to run multiple copies of that, then we provide the MATLAB compiler. They can compile that and run as many copies as they want of the executable. And that gets us around the scalable cost of MATLAB that would be required in like a site license for the whole cluster or university.
Yeah, like, you know, I know this is sometimes be a challenge for the HPC centers, specifically like when you're talking about like licenses, like sometimes it costs a lot. And, you know, it's sometimes hard to, you know, make these like funds available at certain time. So let's move on to the question 5, which is, we are going to talk about software tools as well. So what software tools have you developed for users or for user support? And is it available to the community? How have more interactive tools such as Open on Demand changed the nature and type of users you have to support? Like, do you have any answer like Dave about this?
Yeah, the one in particular that I wanted to talk about, basically I've been developing over the last 6 or 7 years, and we call it KStat. And KStat is just a couple of Perl scripts. And what KStat does is it takes the output of the normal Slurm commands like sinfo and sq and saccount, and it presents that information in a much more readable and convenient manner. Now I go a little beyond that in that I also have a script that runs on each compute node as a cron tab job every 5 minutes, and it gathers information from the /proc file system on each node. So it's gathering stuff like the actual amount of memory that's being used by that application and the CPU utilization. And then it provides all this information to the users and very much colorize it so that if there's inefficiencies, it will warn them about it. For example, if they're running over memory, it'll highlight that in a background red to make it very clear. If they're way under using the memory that they requested, I'll highlight that in yellow to let them know, hey, next time you need to, you know, request a lot less memory. So you kind of cover both bases there. The CPU utilization is very useful in that sometimes you'll get users who request 8 cores, but they're running scalar code. And these things are real easy to flag. And I use this on a daily basis. My first hour of the day is usually looking at what everyone's doing and trying to initiate things as far as, you know, who's running it efficiently, who can I contact and say, hey, look, if you do this, you'll be able to run your code better. But by the same token, we're putting the same tool in the hands of the users so that they can look more in depth and easier at their own code performance. This is available. I will drop a link to it in the chat towards the end. I do have it up on GitHub. It is not just a download, plug it in and run. I only have it running on 2 clusters. If someone wants to use it, I'd be very happy to help with any issues they run across though.
Absolutely. Actually, part of my research, I'm doing one of the open source tool. It's like for helping users for predicting the amount of time and memory that needs for their submitted jobs. And this is like, it's going to be 2 parts from, side of, sysadmin. They want to create that machine learning, tool then for their data. Then after that, provide it to the users. Then the user, they need, they will get help for specifying the amount of memory and time, which is like sometimes, is going to like asking for more resources, going to waste and divorce also the, HPC resources. What do you think, Adam, about this?
Yeah, so I think, so we have something similar we've developed at HCC, as a job report type thing. So I think a lot of places probably have. So that's one of my, one of my questions to folks out there is there any sort of common repository or place that these things can be put? So my concern is we don't all need to develop a wrapper for S account, right? There's probably, we can have one and we can all contribute to it. And in that way, we're not all doing the same thing and replicating effort. But again, as a larger question, is there any common place that folks know of a listing of these sort of tools that we could all benefit from as a community and all contribute to as a community? There's certainly other things, so in my role, I try to discourage or caution, I guess would be a better word, folks against developing homemade stuff, because it becomes an issue of long-term support and continuity and things like that. So I'm very much in favor of more widely available open source community type tools that we can sort of all contribute to and know and learn about.
Sure, like I totally agree with you, Adam, about this point. So there is 2 questions actually I want to answer, and I would like you to answer. The first question is, Mohammed, what is the name of the tool you are working on? So till now, like it's under development. So probably like I'll be posted it on the GitHub by the end of this year. And like I'm trying to publish like a paper based on that. And hopefully like by the end of this year, like is going to be for public. And there is another question actually was asking about what the kind of ticketing system that you guys used. So I know by like University of Nebraska Lincoln, we are using Freshdesk ticketing system. I don't know what about like K-State, University of Colorado Boulder, and University of Missouri, University of New Mexico.
So we had our in-house developed help ticket system that was built maybe 13 years ago, and they kept adding and patching and extending the features. But as staff come and go and hiring new people, it became a big mess that it was so hard to maintain. So we ended up shuffling, going through so many different help ticket systems. And right now we're using something called Summit, like a ZAMMAD. Which works fine. Like people can open help tickets over email. They can log into their accounts to, we can track the help tickets in Slack, respond directly from Slack, or go back to the help system, or just reply by email again.
Sure. So we will go to the next question. So what approaches have you taken towards workforce development that have proven successful? how do you train and onboard new staff in the CI user support area? So I've been working with UNL like for almost 1 year, and I know it was like a challenge. And I was like begging Adam like about, oh, okay, like we need to have like a Zoom, meeting. I want you to train me with this and this. I have problem with this. So I don't know, like, what do you think, Adam and Chile, about it?
Yeah, so it's a challenge, obviously, right? Until fairly recently, the only really the only answer that I know of is you found a student that did HPC as part of their research, and you sort of co-opted them and trained them yourself. And then when they graduated, you hired them as staff, or you obviously you can look for folks elsewhere that have already have the experience. I think that's gotten a lot better recently with some of the grant funded programs to try and train folks, but it's still a challenge, right? So I don't know, Shelley, if you have any thoughts from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think traditionally we've done something similar where we, have a student hourly, and we've probably hired, well, I don't know, but we've hired several students who have become full-time staff members over the years. But that's not probably the most effective way to go about it. So there's a couple of things that I've been thinking about as I step into the new role. And one of them is this discipline specific student cohort where we can get liaisons that exist between our research computing group and certain disciplines on campus. And the idea that I have there is about connecting, they can speak the language of, their discipline. They can bring awareness to the fact that we exist. They can also provide trainings to meet the needs of their peers, and it would be an opportunity for us to work together, and it would be a paid cohort group. So that's one thing. I think we have benefited a lot from, again, the RMAC consortium and some of the workforce development that we've been doing there at the symposium over the years has been big. We do things about writing good resumes and different career paths and whatnot. I think another big thing with workforce development that maybe gets overlooked sometimes is just the some of the trainings that you can provide will really, I mentioned this in the chat, but students are, they're overwhelmed, as we all are, with various things, and they're looking for how to, spin up as quickly as possible, because when they get that knowledge, that can help them in their career. And if you set them with a good foundation, that's only going to benefit them as they move forward. So we've spent a lot of time trying to think about how to help build that workforce that's beyond just trainings on how to use our system. And the Python class I mentioned earlier is one of those. We have done a few seminar series on that realm as well. And then we, within the last year or so, have really started, we formed an RMAC Women in HPC chapter, and we've been pretty active in the last year. And it's, there's workforce development opportunities within that as well. So I think we're trying to hit it from all ends.
Yeah, that's interesting that you guys are also looking at the ambassador cohort type thing. That's an idea we've been playing with for a while. We just haven't had a chance to do it because of time and staff limitations type of things. But it sounds like you're saying that you guys have already done that, and it sounds like it's been pretty successful for you. So I think we may need to redouble some efforts there.
I think it will take a semester to a year to pay back, to start seeing the results. So it's like a lost lead investment at the beginning. Mm-hmm. We also utilize like the Campus Champions list and resources because it has so many answers, and the ask, like the stuff that Doug talked about yesterday, ask CI and other stuff. We also have like a small testing cluster inside the center that we use for testing purposes. So it's more for training the sysadmin side, but it's a matching system that matches all of our other clusters. that our also like application side people can use it to test something before they start messing with the machines.
Great. So yeah, I think this is like one of the big challenges for the HPC centers sometimes. Even like, you know, like interviewing and, you know, choosing the perfect fit to the position, it's sometimes hard. So God with all of you guys. So there is a question actually from Jeff. I'm sorry if I missed it before. Said like, I just changed careers a bit from ecology and biostatics to high performance computing and AI machine learning. I basically had to hit the ground running, simultaneously learning the system on which I work and improving user support for them as well. When you first started doing this, what were the most important lessons you learned? So I'll post the question again in the chat, probably. I'll rewrite it. And so you guys, anyone has an answer? Or
So
like,
I think probably most of us were in the same boat in that, you know, when I learned HPC, I learned it from other people. I learned it a long time ago. There weren't a lot of courses or anything like that I could learn from. So just learning it from other people is what I ended up doing. And the same was true when I got into more of the user support, is just have to pick it up from others rather than there being necessarily a place to go for training. Certainly conferences like this one are great for it. One thing that was mentioned when this group talked on Friday a little bit was whether something like a software carpentry type training module would work, and I'm not sure that's a good approach. But trying to put resources in one area and collect those is kind of what we came up with, both tools and training materials. And something like that might be helpful, but we don't quite know where to put it or how to go about that.
sure. So like our next question is, what methods and strategies have you personally found the most successful for helping HPC users? And, you know, I'll start with Christina, if you have any opinion about it. What do you think?
Really, I think that we really rely on the teach how to fish method. Since all of our help sessions are through Zoom, that's also a strategy that's been really great in my opinion, or a method, because the users can share their screen so that all who are helping and all who are needing help can see it at the same time, and we can direct the user what to type or take control. And also, if we do take control, we can they can clearly see what we are doing so that they can maybe know in the future how to troubleshoot for themselves. I remember, like I had mentioned in my introduction, I actually was introduced to this world through a different job. So I remember very clearly being a new user just a few years ago. And when it was not, when the help sessions were not via Zoom, it was very difficult for me to see what the helpers, with the people that have what the position that I have now were doing on my computer screen. I would take a lot of screenshots and try to figure it out later to remember what exactly they were doing, because I barely knew Bash at that point or Linux at that point. And so I think that the Zoom has been really, really helpful for that personally.
Sure. So, and what do you think, like, Shelley, about this?
Yeah, so I think the big thing for me has been just recognizing that everybody learns differently. I mean, when you have as large of a user base as we do, you know, one method and one strategy isn't going to, you know, you're not gonna have a one size fits all. Mm-hmm. So what we try to do is approach it from a lot of different angles. So for example, for some people, if we're doing a training, some of them can dedicate a whole day. They want to do one full day and then that's it. And some of them can't do that. So they will be more likely to come to something if it's once a week for an hour at a time. We also try to provide a good mix of in-person trainings and on-demand material and availability of staff for consulting in office hours, for example. And I think the other thing too, and this gets tricky if you don't have a large staff, but trying to, and I'll be the first to admit we don't always employ this, but if you can you have different people teach the same workshop in a different semester so people can get a different perspective? So maybe you have staff member A teach Intro to Linux in the spring, and then staff member B teaches it in the fall or whatever. And I think the other big thing is just, if you have a variety, and this is tricky too, but if you get a variety of staff members who have different backgrounds that can speak to sort of the different types of users you're going to have, the users might feel more comfortable, and they'll feel, like they can better communicate whatever issue it is. And that's a real benefit that we've had with our connection with the libraries, because the staff that we work with there have a whole different perspective and help us to sort of reach some of these user bases, the individuals.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like there is like a comment from Dylan. He said, I will say that the best results has been that they have acted as reviewers for training documentations. He mentioned the users. They are the target audience, so having them help us communicate better is very positive. I totally agree with you, Dylan. So what do you think, Adam? Like, what method and strategies you think is the most successful?
Yeah, so I agree with Shelley that there's no one size all fits solution, and you have to try to offer a variety. I think in our experience, the best bang for your buck overall has probably been the software carpentry style boot camps. The 2-day or 1-day boot camps where people come and it's very hands-on and you sit there and you do stuff, right? Certainly, death by PowerPoint is not a good solution, I would say. You want to have things be as interactive and as hands-on as possible. We also try to anyway, offer a variety of subject matter. So we also have done just standard software carpentry workshops. And again, I think this is something someone mentioned earlier, where it's not HPC specific, but it's a good way to get people just introduced to Linux, because you got to have that base foundation. And then it's also, kind of helps get people in the door and get folks aware that you even exist, which can also be a large challenge at some point. In person, I would say, is probably the most effective, but it's also the most time consuming. So you really have to be careful, and in-person stuff doesn't scale, right? It's very effective, but it's a very high cost way to do it.
Sure. So
yeah. So we also, go ahead.
I'll agree with that. What we try to do is say, well, come to a workshop first, read the documentations first, watch training videos first. And if you still aren't quite putting everything together, I'll sit down with you for an hour, and there probably isn't a more valuable way of getting it across. So I agree with you fully. It's not a scalable solution, but again, it is the most effective way. You just can't anticipate a lot of times what people are going to not understand from the documentations or the training videos. Things like, I've had people ask me, well, is Slurm a programming language? No, it's not a programming language. It's kind of this. And those are not the kinds of things that you can put into, you can't anticipate quite so many things to put in your documentations and your training. But you sit down, you get immediate feedback to understand where they're not understanding things. And
sure.
so
So What we also found is, like, you know how enterprise IT, I think 70% of their tickets is like password resets. So in HPC, we have also like very common problems that everyone is asking about. So now we record these and post them on our YouTube channel and social media, and we point our users so they can go on like whatever social media we have. And follow these channels and then look for the trainings. And when we post something new, we also update the users and say like, hey, we posted this. Or a help ticket comes in and we just point them to that video. And then if you still have questions, come back.
Yeah, we also try to do videos like that. And I think, so I think one of the hard problems though is gauging the effectiveness of these things, right? So it's very hard to try and gauge how well something is working for these various strategies. So that's another question for the community. If anyone has any insights on how do you tell if what you're doing is working, I think that's also a thing that should be discussed.
So there is a comment from Kirim. I'm like, I hope like I spelled your name correctly. I'm sorry if I spelled it wrong. I am in the same boat. I am fairly new research computing engineer facilitator. One thing that helped me is writing user documentation for the cluster. I've also been working on the cluster myself. I think it helps to actually use the cluster. I read all the answers given to users by the senior person and keep a list of questions, answers that I think will be helpful for the future. It's been hard. I've been programmer for years and I'm used to knowing what I'm doing. On the plus side, I'm starting to feel more competent in the job. I really like the comments and I totally agree with it. So we have just like 4 minutes left. So I'm trying to take questions if there's a questions. And please forgive me if I forget any of the questions. So I try to keep up with all of the questions. So in the meanwhile, there is like last question. How do you organize HPC accounts and groups and handle resource allocations? For example, computer storage nodes. Do you allow access to outside and or commercial users? What do you think, Dave? Like, how do you handle this like in K-State?
Yeah, so K-State cluster is available to anyone at the university, but we also are allowing anyone in the state of Kansas to access our resources as long as it's non-commercial. And we also include any collaborators from our research groups. So I think there's probably a lot of other universities that likewise do that. So we do extend out our resources, and that also helps us when it does come time to ask for funding, because we can say not only that we're supporting K-State, but we're doing some outreach as well.
Sure. There is actually, let me take this question. How do you handle users when they complain about job spent time on the cluster? It was like from Sandeep, from a direct message to me. So what do you think, guys? For myself, like sometimes it's like priority things. Sometimes if they are running too many jobs at certain time, like their priority level is going to be lower, then sometimes it's hard. So we have like access or priority access. They can sometimes buy and get priority access for the cluster. But I don't know, like, what do you guys think about the question?
Yeah, I mean, usually we sort of end up explaining how fair share works, or the concepts behind fair share sort of over and over again in the tickets. But that usually is an acceptable answer. And again, it's, it helps up front if you've sort of managed expectations about what a shared system is. And that because it's shared, you get to use it for free, but it does mean you have to wait occasionally. And then we do offer priority access, so we can point them to that and say, hey, if this is really time sensitive, that there's a way you can get that immediate turnaround.
So Tanash, I'm interested in the last question. So if you go back to that one,
Oh, yeah, sure.
So we recently,
Yeah,
so
you have 1
so
minute.
yeah. So we had some like touch base with some for-profit companies and close in the area, and trying to work with these people and meeting their needs will be very easy for us. But at the same time, the politics as a nonprofit working for a for-profit is very complicated. So we ended up pointing these people and saying that maybe you're better to go and collaborate as a sponsored project with a research group on campus. And then through that way, we would be able to work with you on providing more HPC resources. But I'm interested in hearing from other people, how do you deal with these things, like with for-profit, with a nonprofit? Like maybe Shelly, Adam, Dave.
Yeah, we typically, we traditionally haven't really let commercial users on our system. We have sort of a policy that if you're affiliated with somebody on our campus, we'll allow it. The question we get is more in sometimes with people who want to purchase into our condo cluster or something like that. And
Exactly, yeah.
yeah, and we haven't gone down that road yet, but we haven't totally ruled it out, I guess is what I would say. But I think to your point, Huss, about all the politics around that, it's just a big mountain to climb that I'm not sure is worth it. But it's interesting to think about.
There is always lots of questions came to our minds, and it's hard to answer all of those questions just in 1 hour. But I would love to thank all of our panelists today, like Shelly, Dave, Hussein, Christina, Natasha, and Adam. And thank you, Henry, for having us in this panel. And hopefully you guys get a very useful information and knowledge from our panel. And thank you so much. I'll give the talk to Henry.
Thank you very much, Mohammed and the whole panel. We really appreciate it. So a round of virtual applause for y'all. This was fantastic. And there was an enormous amount of discussion on the Zoom chat. I'm just so excited about how much engagement this session got going. This is just really wonderful. Coming back now in about 28 minutes at 1/4 to the hour, we're going to be doing the intake interview session led by Dirk Colbury, and we have a bunch of guests for that. They are real live researchers engaged in real live computing intensive and data intensive research, and they'll be helping us with this session. We're really looking forward to it. This is a practicum. We'll get about 15 minutes of Dirk walking us through the basics, and then we'll go right into actually doing intake interviews with our researchers. So we're looking forward to that session coming up in about 27 minutes. So meet us here at 1/4 till the hour.